Alrighty, welcome back. There's my milling machine turned sideways, and because I'm adding a DRO. I went online and ordered a DRO kit from eBay. Now, when you go on eBay and you put in DRO set, there's like countless results pop up. Now, my what is it? The little machine shop website. They sell a DRO system specifically for this milling machine. It's a Bluetooth type of setup. So you buy the 3 scales, you buy the Bluetooth transmitter, then you buy a Bluetooth tablet, and that whole setup will run you about 600 bucks, maybe a little bit more than 600 bucks. I really wasn't too keen on the whole Bluetooth thing. I'd rather not have the Bluetooth. That's just me. That's just my personal opinion. I'm sure it's perfectly fine, but it's not what I wanted. And it was a little bit pricier than what I wanted to pay. So I went on eBay and I got this one. Now again, there's countless setups on eBay. Most of the displays look like this. By the way, I did not get the display yet. The display and the y-axis are coming later, so I got the Z and the X now. And of course, so it's got instruction manuals, and they're decent. They're very, very thorough with all the measurements and the gaps and the tolerances. And I was reading through that, and I'm like, I just had to put it away. Just way too many words and numbers, and I just wasn't in the mood to read that. So I just put it on. I did watch a couple of YouTube videos just to kind of make sure that I had the gist of it correct. They do provide brackets to help you mount it. So for example, they give you a bracket like this, and they give you a bracket like that. And I found them completely pointless for this, at least for this axis. Maybe they'll come in handy for the others, but probably not. As far as the way they were intended, I can't use this one at all. This one, the hole that I bolted through here to the reader and the one there, those were threaded, and so I drilled those out so I could screw right into the reader. I did put a spacer in between there. We'll talk about spacing here a little bit later. And I drilled holes, get that cable out of the way. I drilled a hole here and here for some bolts to go through to tap into the headstock here. That other hole is there because when I was drilling the hole in here, you know, sometimes drill bits just decide to break, and it's no fault of the person drilling the hole. At least that's my answer. So if you look in here, let me turn that light down a little bit. So you can see, maybe get the light to cooperate, get a good light there. So you can see the piece of drill bit where it's broken. So I just drilled another hole down. You know, the drill bit was dull, and I was probably pushing too hard and not holding at a good angle. And it just decided to say, screw you. And so no big deal, just drilled another hole. Now, the kit, the hardware for the kit, there's M4 and M5 bolts. I don't have a whole lot of metric hardware. I have a ton of like 440s and 632 and 832 and 1032. Got a ton of that stuff. But I've got very little metric hardware, let alone metric taps. So anyways, the way I mounted this. Again, as I said, the instructions are very thorough. But as far as I'm concerned, the critical parts are you don't want the reader to bottom out before the head is all the way, or either axis, any axis, is end travel. So I positioned it to where when the head is all the way up, the reader still has like that much to go, just a little bit more to go before it bottoms out. That way it bottoms out up here instead of in the reader. Now on the downside, I kind of screwed up. I could have ordered a much longer scale, but by the time you get to the bottom, I mean, yeah, I have maybe another inch or two that it could go down, but by the time you put a chuck in there, it'd be hitting the bed. So yeah, I could have put a longer scale, but I didn't. But I don't risk hitting the bottom here. unless I crank it all the way down with nothing in the spindle and nothing on the bed. You know what I mean? So once the part is down and once there's a spindle on, there's no way I'm going to get to the bottom of that. But basically, I just marked center, and I marked where the ends hit. And the first thing I had to do was pull off the scale that was on the... That was a hammer that almost landed on my toe. But the first thing I did was remove this scale right here. And it was held on with some M4 bolts, and it was bolted on right there. So that top bolt hole, I just got really lucky. The top bolt hole was in the perfect position. So I just used that. And so what I did was I bolted it on there. I aligned the reader and the head where I wanted them. And then I screwed the plate to the reader. Now I put some shims between that plate and the reader. It's just basically a couple of washers. And I had already drilled the holes, stupid thing. I had already drilled the holes here and here. And then so I screwed it on, and then I used a transfer punch. One of these guys. I used a transfer punch through the hole and then whacked it with a hammer. And then I just slid that all the way down, and then I drilled and tapped those holes. Now I drilled and tapped those for a 1032. And so those are 1032 screws here. And the screws that are here, those two screws, they came with the kit. So they just screwed right into there. Now I had to open those holes up because they were threaded. And I don't know, you know, like I said, the intended purpose of those brackets didn't really help me much. So I drilled through those holes so I could then put the screws in to screw to the reader. And so then here, see if we can get that light back on there, you can see there's a spacer in there. So I've got some spacers in there, and so when I bolt the bolts through, it clamps the bracket onto the spacers, and the spacers are so that there's a little bit of a gap right in here. And I think what they want, I forget exactly what the instructions say, but something like 1 to 1.5 millimeter gap in here. So basically, when the head is moving, this is not scraping on this. Also, the reader is gapped, so the reader is not scraping on the vertical column. So nothing is scraping on anything. And there's a little bit of a gap between the reader and the scale. I don't know if you can see that very well. So I basically just positioned everything so there's about a millimeter gap between all the moving parts. And once I had the top position, and I basically just eyeballed the bottom and clamped it. And then once I had all this screwed together, I lowered it all the way down so that this automatically positioned this, and then center hold it, drilled it, and tapped it. Now that bottom screw here is a 632, and the screw up here, I'm sorry, not a 632, it's an 832. That's an 832. So I drilled and tapped an 832, and then here I drilled and tapped 1032s, and that was the existing hole, which was, I believe, an M4, and the screw that came in the kit had fit that perfectly fine. So I only had to drill and tap 3 holes, and then just kind of bolt everything together, and the Z-axis is pretty much done. So you can see the movement there. All right. And again, as long as nothing is scraping and everything is parallel and true, and you don't bottom out on the scales, I mean, that's pretty much all you really got to be worried about or concerned about, in my opinion. If you do yours exactly the way I do mine and yours breaks, please don't be mad at me. By the way, like I said, I don't have the display yet. I won't get that until, a couple more days. So I won't know for a fact until I actually plug that in and turn it on and make sure it works. But so far it's moving fine, nothing is binding, nothing scraping, it seems fine. Down here, let's take a look at this one. Now what I did first was I marked a center line on the movable part, and I cranked it all the way back this way and I marked it, and I cranked it all the way that way and I marked it, and then I got my center line. This is a 4-inch travel. The company I ordered the stuff from did not have a 4-inch scale, but they had a 5-inch scale. So this is a 5-inch scale, and I marked the center line, and if I put it like that, well, you can see it overhangs quite a bit, plus the reader would be right over the bolt hole. So I can't put that scale centered, which is fine, it doesn't have to be. I'm going to put the scale back here and up like that. I'm going to put it like that. So the bracket that connects this piece here, that my little finger there's pointing on, the bracket that's going to bolt onto here and go over the top of the scale and connect to the reader part, that's going to have to be a little bit of a joggled type of a bracket. So I'm going to have to kind of figure that out, plan that out. But that'll get bolted right there. Now the cast iron base is not square, so when I bolt that on, I'll have to kind of put a couple of spacers on it. So it bolts onto the spacers and it doesn't put any torsional load on the scale. So I'm going to drill and tap a hole here. Let's see, it's going to go about right there. So I'm going to drill and tap a hole here, drill and tap a hole here, bolt that on with some spacers under it, and then I have to figure out the bracket to connect this to this. So let me get that mounted and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Alrighty, I've got the scale mounted here. You can see the offset bracket right there. And again, the scale is perfectly parallel with the movement, and all the gaps, everything is good. All of that works good. I did put a little washer here as a spacer and here. That way I wasn't putting any stress. If I just bolted that one down, that was actually leaning out, and to push it in would be trying to bend this. And that's because the casting isn't perfectly flat. So by spacing it out, now it sets on 2 points, and it's good, no stress, it's all good. I also got the display, and I went ahead and mounted that on the arm on the wall. All of that is temporary. This was stuff that I mounted when I got the CNC router, but now things are changing, and I'm going to, at some point, build some shelves and clean all of this up. But right now, this can fold out of the way there, nice and neat under that shelf, or I can bring it back over on the other side here. But there's my display. And if we take a look on the back, we see the connections for the axes, and there's another connection, and that's for the RPM sensor that I already got mounted right there. Now, when I ordered the display, it had a choice: 3 axes with RPM or without RPM, and I could have sworn I ordered without RPM because I really don't need RPM, because if you remember several videos ago, I tried putting an RPM sensor on there and it just wasn't working because it was cheap junk. And so I'm just like, well, it doesn't matter because this only gets up to 2500, and when you look at speed charts online, to mill aluminum with a 1/4-inch end mill, they say you got to be at like $6 grand. So I just crank it up full blast and it works perfectly fine. I haven't had any issues with it. So I just figured RPM isn't really that important. But I got it. So I'll connect it and it'll be there. Maybe if I drill or mill steel or some harder materials, then it'd be nice to slow it down to the correct RPM. But 90% of what I'm going to be doing is aluminum. So it's just going to be full bore, and RPM would be kind of pointless. But anyways, it's there, so I'll connect it and I'll use it. Now right here, there's a little lug, and I assumed that that is an earth lug. There's a hole in there. You can't really see because my video quality is kind of crappy. But you can stick a wire in there and then crank that down to tighten it on there. So I assumed it was a grounding or an earth lug. But the instructions don't tell you. There's no mention of that in the instructions, except for if you look in the instruction manual, in the back there's like troubleshooting tips. And one of the troubleshooting tips here, I forget, I can't read that to the camera, but one of the problems says that it could be because the grounding lead is not connected to the milling machine. Well, I'm assuming that's what that is. So I will connect a wire from that to the chassis of the milling machine, and I guess that's a good thing to do that. I don't know. It would be nice if the manual told you that, but it does not. All right, so I still need to plug things in. Now, spoiler alert, I did plug 2 in. I turned it on. It seems to work. I have not plugged in the third axis because I have not installed the third axis yet. But I do have the third axis, and I've been playing around like where I want to mount it. If I mount it on the back, which is where I wanted to mount it, it actually hits right here, and I'm going to lose ½ an inch of travel unless I cut a notch out of there, but I really don't want to compromise the stiffness here. And so I really don't want to do that. Even though it would probably be okay, I don't want to do that. If I mount it on the front, it's going to be in the way of this. And I would have to take that scale off, which would be fine. And the adjusters here would be in the way. This would be in the way. Now I could get past here by putting it on spacers to bring it forward a little bit. This, what I think I would have to do is swap this with that adjuster here. Just kind of take those and swap them. I'm assuming the thread is the same. I haven't tried that yet. So that's my first step, is to see if it's possible to swap those two and then mount it onto the front. And I think that's the best way to go. I don't really want it in the front because I'm working here. It's just more stuff that might be in the way. Even it would be fine. But I would rather mount it on the front than mount it on the back and lose ½ an inch of travel. Now, I know what you're thinking. With my vise mounted here, I'm losing about 1.5 inches of travel. Well, that's not that big a deal because I can always move that. This is a temporary loss of travel. If I mount the scale here, I'm going to have a permanent loss of travel. So I think I'm going to try to mount it here. And if that just doesn't work out for me, then I'll mount it here. Maybe I'll cut a little bit out here just to gain maybe 1/4 inch. I don't know. Like I said, I really don't want to touch those because again, I don't want to compromise that. But anyways, that's where that's at, and the display is there. And anyway, so let me get some stuff done. Let me get that mounted. I'll get back to you and show you how that looks. Okay, so that is mounted, and I got some spacers in here, and that gets it to where, obviously that's not attached yet, that gets it to where this reader is not hitting the gib adjustments, and I did get this moved over, so I can still activate this, that's fine, and so this reader will slide over right about there, which is close enough to center. Now I just need to make a bracket to connect it from there to there, which is pretty much, will be the same as what I did here. But I don't think I like it here, but like I said, if I put it back here, I'm going to lose dimension, and it's fine here. It's not really in the way. It's not going to get in the way of this. It's just that I would rather it be back there, but this is a good compromise because I'm not going to lose travel. And if after using it, I really don't like it, I can always just put it back there. But I think for now, that should be fine. So I'm just going to go with it. So let me get the bracket down here made, and I'll get back to you when I'm ready to test it out, see if it works. Alrighty, the thing is installed here. This one actually wasn't as hard to connect as I was expecting it to be. The little bracket that's holding that on, let me move that out of the way. I use the same, I don't know if we can see it. I use the same mounting screws as the piece for the chip cover, the little rubber thing here. So there's a metal bracket that goes from that screw to that screw that holds this rubber thing on. So I just made another bracket that used those same 2 holes, and then I bent it out and then up and then drilled it for those 2 bolts there. So I didn't have to drill or tap any new holes into the machine. I just used existing screw holes. I don't know if that light helps or hinders, but I just use existing screw holes there, and again, that bracket just bends out forward and then bends up, and then I drilled the holes to mount to the reader. And that works pretty well. And I did move this lock over, and that does lock pretty tight right there, and then I can loosen it. Of course, you can pull that out and turn to adjust. If I need to, I think I can I can lengthen that if I had to. But right now, that's working fine. This one was kind of a compromise because, you know, obviously I would rather it be on the other side. I would rather it be back here, but as I said before, I would lose some travel. And there's only 4 inches of travel anyways. So by putting it here, I keep all 4 inches of that travel. And you know, I might put a guard on it. So that could go, theoretically, that could go right like that. But then I can't reach the little lock, so I could cut that off like right here. So from about maybe that rivet over, just cut that off, get rid of that flange, then I could reach the lock and just hold that on with some double stick tape. That would then kind of, I mean, I know that sounds kind of crappy, but that would then just cover that up and kind of keep the chips out of here. Even though it's mounted upside down so the chips can't get in there, that would keep chips from getting in behind the bracket or behind here, which will be harder to vacuum out. Again, I don't know. I'll still play around with it. And it might very well be that I just don't like it there, and after a while of use, I just get tired of it being there and I put it in the back. I mean, I have no idea right now. But right now it does work. I've got all of the connectors just kind of hanging free right here. The next step is to do some wire management and tidy everything up. And if we look at the controller, if we spin this around, and everything's plugged in, this wire here is grounded to the mill up. There's some grounding screws that go into the base inside of the cover here. So that just goes, I drilled a hole in there and that goes up into a grounding screw. And of course the power plug. Right now, that power plug, the way it's plugged in, is all the way down over to there. So I'm going to put another power bank back here. Like I said, all of this stuff, all of those tools are temporary the way they're mounted. So I'll put a power bank back there to plug some of this stuff in. I need to sort all of the cables. I'm not really sure exactly how I want to do that yet, but I'm going to have all the cables kind of run back here with enough slack to move, and then up, and then over, and then to here. And that's the plan. And hopefully that doesn't take too long, but I'm not going to make you watch me do that. But when we turn this on, helps to plug it in. So it's a Ditron unit. And you'll notice there it's set to mill. Now, when I first turned this on, that said lathe. And I went through the instructions to figure out how to change it to mill, and it said to press that icon, which is F6, but that icon wasn't there. And it took me a while to figure out how to get the icon there. And basically, you can go through different pages here, and that's the page it was on when it first powered on. And I'm like, where the heck's the icon? So just going through the different ones, there it is here. Press this, and then we have DRO setup. So press down to DRO setup, and then you can't see that on, well, you can't really see that on my display. Looking at my camera, it doesn't look like you could read that very well. But that says right here, you can choose mill or lathe. Here you can choose your language. But you're just using these, oops, DRO set, and then enter. So there you can see it's mill or lathe. See, I'm still trying to remember how to do this. You press this one, it says set. So press this one, and then you can change it to lathe, grind, mill, and then you go to the next one, which is your language. Come down here for decimal points, and axis, and dynamic recovery on, and on. I don't know why there's two ons. I think this is one reason why I got this unit, this machine. I'm trying to get a different angle so maybe you could read all of that. Like maybe it's kind of bright. I don't think my camera's picking it up very well, but I'll just select exit. Also, we got the RPM, and I got the RPM sensor. There's the magnet. Notice when the magnet hits, you get the red light here. So if I just do that, you can see the RPM. And but anyways, one reason why I picked the Ditron unit is because in my opinion, it looked nicer than some of the other choices, and it had that recovery thing available. Meaning, I'm pretty sure if I turn it off and then come back tomorrow and turn it on, it'll remember where I was. The other units I was looking at didn't have that feature. Now, if I remember right, this unit cost $150, $155, somewhere around there. The other one was about $120. $125, so this is about $30 more. And when I first ordered this stuff, I ordered the scales from a different seller because these scales are $95 each. The other seller, they were about 45 bucks each, or 50, 45 or 50 bucks each, and these were about 90 or 95 bucks each. So these were $40 more a piece. So I bought the cheaper scales and the more expensive, if you want to call 150 more expensive, but the more expensive display. Fortunately, the people I bought the scales from commented or replied to me and said, "We noticed you bought the scales but not our display. Please check the plug wiring and make sure that it's compatible." And they sent me an image of their plug wiring. Now, they all use 9-pin connectors, and I just assumed that they're all the same. And they're not. And come to find out, the ones I had ordered were not compatible with that display. So I asked them to cancel that order, which they did. I thank them very much. And then I bought the more expensive scales. So the cheaper scales, again, they're all a 9-pin plug, but the cheaper scales only use 4 of the 9 pins. It's power, ground, A, and B. These scales use 6 of the 9 pins. Power, ground, A, and B, R, and a shield. Other scales won't have the shield, but they'll have the R, so it'd be 5. Other scales, more expensive ones, will use 7 or 8 of the pins. They'll have a power, ground, A and B positive, A and B negative, R, and may or may not have a shield. And sometimes R is labeled as Z. And there's no consistency. Some manufacturers, pin 1 will be power, others maybe pin 2 will be power. Some of them will use the red wire for power, some will use the yellow wire for power. There's like no consistency. So if you buy scales from one seller and you buy a display from another seller, you really need to check out the descriptions very carefully. They typically will leave the pinouts so you can tell if they're compatible or not. And you really need to get compatible scales. And of course, from what I was reading, I did like maybe 5 minutes of research. But apparently the more wires they have, the better they are, the more accurate they are. So that's why the cheaper ones, like the $40 ones or the $50 ones, will have a 4-wire 9-pin plug. And the more expensive they get, the more wires they use, apparently. Again, I'm kind of new to all this stuff. Now, I'm not going to show you any more about how to use that because honestly, right now, I don't really know any more about how to use that. Other than when I turn the crank here, you can see that there's my y-axis. There's my y-axis moving, and then we have the x-axis. Sorry, I'm so shaky trying to crank and hold a camera at the same time. So there's the x-axis, and of course we have the z-axis, and then you can zero them. So I could just 0, 0, and 0, and then I can say, for example, if I wanted to move the x-axis 1 inch, that's not what I expected. Hold on. Can I clear that? Maybe I need a decimal point. Is there a decimal point? 1. There we go. So now if I wanted to move the x 1 inch, then I can go until, yeah, apparently I don't know how to use this. Yeah, well, I moved it. before I hit the enter. So yeah, I guess you got to hit the enter first. Anyways, I'm still learning how to use this. I'm not the one to tell you how to use it. I haven't even like turned the machine on with this running yet. I've just turned the cranks and hit some buttons. That's all I know. So I need to learn how to use this thing. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to suggest you guys do and go watch a bunch of other YouTubers. But anyways, so since some of you have been watching since the first time I got this machine, and I've been buying some parts and getting it fixed up and using, just thought I'd like to show you how I installed the scales and the display, and hopefully in future videos I'll get some more experience with this and we'll be able to talk about this some more and use it some more. And so yeah, but I've been talking way too much. I'm going to stop rambling on. I'm going to let you guys go while I tidy up the wiring. And as always, until next time, thanks for watching.